Physical activity and exercise revolve around a little known but critical principle to understand called Henneman's size principle. The size principle can be separated into similar yet slightly different domains: the size principle of strength and the size principle of hypertrophy, which refers to increasing muscle tissue. In this video, I'll briefly cover the size principle as it relates to strength training, endurance training, or non-exercise physical activity, also known as the move more movement. I'll cover the size principle of hypertrophy in another video. Motor units, pictured here, are made up of motor neurons and the muscle fibers that are innervated by the motor neurons. Motor units work together to coordinate the muscle contractions involved in general physical activity and structured exercise training. For ease of understanding, I'll refer to motor units from here on as muscle fibers and muscle tissue. During any normal activity, muscle fibers are recruited based on their need to produce force for that activity. And because of the body's amazing ability to be as efficient as possible and conserve energy, it will only recruit the amount of muscle fibers needed and not one fiber more. The muscle fibers are recruited in order of size, which is why it's known as the size principle. To the naked eye, it looks like the whole muscle is being activated or contracting, but in reality, only the amount of muscle needed to produce force is contracting, and the rest of the muscle fibers are just going along for the ride. They're at rest and not producing force. Under a microscope, endurance fibers are the smallest and produce the least amount of force. The other type of muscle fiber, strength fibers, are larger in size and produce significantly more force, but are only recruited if necessary. This is almost completely dependent on the load of the task being performed. The greater the load, such as lifting moderate to heavy weights, the greater number of muscle tissue being activated. And this is what creates the distinction between non-exercise physical activity, or the move more movement, endurance training, and strength training. Non-exercise physical activity, such as walking, gardening, household chores, carrying groceries, or taking a flight or two of stairs instead of the escalator, only activates a very small fraction of muscle. More specifically, in most cases, only a small fraction of endurance fibers are being activated to perform the task, and no strength fibers whatsoever. In fact, this study showed that in most activities of daily living, only 4 to 10% of lower body muscles are being activated for common activities of daily living, which means 90% of muscle tissue or more remains inactivated and untrained. Even climbing stairs only activates 20 to 25% of muscle tissue. As we move up the intensity totem pole from moving more or non-exercise physical activity to endurance training, there is a corresponding need for the body to activate more muscle tissue. Slow to medium paced running activates approximately 25 to 40% of muscle tissue, with the remaining tissue inactivated and untrained. But even with running, the body can produce enough force by only activating smaller endurance muscle fibers, and there's no need to activate strength fibers unless the run turns into a short burst of high intensity, like a sprint. The size principle of strength dictates that strength fibers are only activated if the load is such that only about 1 to 15 repetitions can be performed, and only when the activity is taken to at or very near what is called task failure or muscle failure, such as what you see in this video. Simply stated, what this means is that if you aren't strength training, you aren't or are rarely activating strength muscle fibers, and less than 60% of your muscle tissue is being used. As you move down the intensity totem pole, if you aren't endurance training, less than 40% of muscle tissue is being used. And if all you're doing is moving more, less than 20% of muscle tissue is being used, and in most cases, is 10% or less. It's a primary reason why old adults perform activities of daily living near their maximal capabilities, and why there can be little difference in strength between recreationally active older adults and their sedentary counterparts. These are extremely important concepts to keep in mind. Moving more is better than nothing, but then again, so is anything that isn't nothing. Health is strongly associated with fitness level, and fitness level is strongly associated with the intensity of the activity being performed. Moving more may or may not be medicine. It's primarily medicine for people who are deconditioned. But exercise, which is defined as a subset of physical activity that is planned, structured, repetitive, and purposeful, and that is frequently employed for improving or maintaining optimal levels of physical fitness and function, is always medicine, and even more so when it comes in the form of strength training. Exercise will always trump moving more.